Okay, so thank you for being here. And I am going to share some thinking with you that I've been doing about consciousness, because I care very much about the planet and about how we are in relationship to both the planet, to ourselves and to each other. And so, having spent much of my time as a little girl and as an adult being in nature and just really listening, I feel like there are things that if we might understand them a little better as a collective, that perhaps those of us who aren't yet engaged with creating realities that are positive might find out why it matters and how they can actually start that process without being totally new agey and stuff like that. So that hence the title, Consciousness and the Creative Collective, Dynamic Emergence, and I'll go into those different elements. And where we get to is, I feel like, profoundly exciting, but I'm kind of keeping that bit till the end. And some of it I'll go into more than others. So, and if you have any questions, please ask. Don't feel like you have to wait. So the big question is really the difference between a mundane life or a mundane experience of life and something that feels magical. And I'm guessing that some of us here in the room, if not all of us, have had that sensation where we can feel like something big is happening, something bigger than just our rational mind planning our lives ahead, like moment by moment, or something big in the collective realm, something that's beyond what we normally perceive as predictable. And I think the question that I want to look at is, how do we honour that? How do we recognise it? What are the qualities of recognising it? And then how do we honour it and participate with it to allow it to come into its own? And that has a little something to do with intelligence, I think, or a different understanding, at least, of intelligence. So don't be overwhelmed, but these are kind of general ideas on what intelligence is made up of. There are different people, Howard Gardner is one of them, who have done all sorts of explorations to see. I know it's unnatural to split anything up, like trying to split up the ocean and say, well, this is the Indian Ocean and that's the North Sea. It's like, well, it's absurd, it's all one body. So, of course, our experience of being intelligent to whatever degree, or in whichever directions, is all one thing too. But sometimes when we look at the formal education process that's been the most typical, what we might call conventional, tends to focus more on, say, the rational intelligence, the mental process. And I think we know now, we probably know anyway, but again, back to the mainstream, which is really where this is headed. These other intelligences, like the sensorial intelligences, feeling knowledge in our body, is a huge one, and learning how to decipher when that's happening. The intuitive intelligence, like having a hunch against all logic, just like if that plus that equals that, and yet there's this thing over here that's calling you, and you just know that that's the right door to go through, but it's not necessarily logical. That's what I would say for this, is the intuitive intelligence. The emotional intelligence is the ability to feel, like when we log a series of trees, or when we blow up a mountain because we think there's something better inside it than its whole beingness. That, to me, if we can feel the tear in our own fabric when that's happening, that to me would be emotional intelligence. And also just the ability to communicate between ourselves with a certain transparency and self-ownership, so that it's safe. Like, to be honest, it's safe to express our needs, and we're not going around blaming each other for things that we're not happy about. The motivational intelligence is another sort of classic. And that, I think, I would call that being called forth from beyond ourselves to beyond ourselves. So there's some kind of inner motivation. And if it's at its most basic level, then I think that's what we see with, for instance, corporations who legally are bound to make financial profit. That's their legal obligation. And so even if they didn't want to, their hands are tied in that direction, so that's the motivation. But now as a collective, we're seeing that if the motivation is not more holistic in nature, then we're basically chopping a tree off that we're sitting on the top of. And obviously that's a very short-term lifespan for all of us. And obviously more than just humans. But hopefully the fact that it also affects humans will be the final prompter for those that don't have that emotional relationship to nature. Associative intelligence, for some reason I'm calling that geometric. I don't yet know why, but it's just the term that came up when I was creating these thoughts out loud. But it's something to do, I think, perhaps with, apart from the obvious, making associations between things, seeing relationships, also perhaps being able to perceive how things connect into other dimensions, into other realities and time frames. And then your good old-fashioned basic pattern, which is, as we've probably all been told over the years, that the brain loves to recognise patterns, and as soon as it's done that, some part of you relaxes, and then you can kind of experience the rest. And again, I've already touched on those, like empathy, teleology, which is that sensation of being pulled forwards. So often we think, as humans, that we're creating everything like kicking a football and it's going in a certain direction. And this is just an invitation to give thought to the idea that we're being prompted by the future, by that which is beyond our vision, our literal sight, to go forward to meet something. So there's kind of a coming home. And inspiration, of course, is the quality of excitement that again prompts us to fine-tune what direction that movement might be, what it might look like, where it might occur, who with, those sorts of questions. And underneath all of that, like under the iceberg, under the water, all comes down to communication. And communication, as you know, is very much a two-way street. So there's the hearing and the listening, but there's also the speaking. So I would love for us all to experience listening as something deeper than just the words. So deep ecology, deep listening as a deep ecology. Understanding that there's so much being communicated to us all the time, you know, especially by nature, but not as if that's separate, because of course we are nature. But there's so many different facets to nature, so many different appearances, legs, no legs, trunks, stems, rocks, you know, all of these aspects of intelligence, different kinds of intelligence, different frequency ranges of intelligence. And to me, deep listening would be the ability to sit, to just sit and be present and hear what's being communicated. And that would come back to the intelligences, probably the intuitive, but also the sensorial, like feeling communication in our body when something's good or bad. Like that game we used to play where you'd hide something in a room and you go like hot, warmer, warmer, warm, hot, 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 or cold, cold, cold. Like being able to tell the difference, like when you're really tuned in and when you're still not quite dialed in yet. And the quality of our listening obviously will have an impact on what we hear and what we feel we now know as a result of having tried to engage in the listening process. And especially from a human perspective, oppositional or co-creative. Like, I mean, I could give this talk and someone could ask me, well, you know, what's it about then? And there might be a way that they ask it that I automatically know that they want to tell me what a stupid talk it is. And someone else might ask me, well, what's it about then? And I automatically know they really want to understand something that's different from what they currently know. So we can ask questions in a way that's either more confrontive and shuts down potential, and this kind of leads into the whole aspect of how do we have a creative environment, or something where we're genuinely aware that we don't know everything, or we don't know everything yet, and hopefully yet will probably be an infinite period of time, because to me that curiosity is what keeps us engaged. So creating the right environment, having the right attitude, really, and just being open to different opinions, different species, different thoughts, different feelings. This is all embedded in consciousness. And very simply put, consciousness, an easy way to frame it, the psychological and the philosophical. So the psychological is the fact that I'm actually physically awake. I have language, I have a body, and I'm talking. That's my psychological consciousness. The philosophical consciousness is the endless question. You know, where do we come from? What is that which gives birth to the psychological? And that's not what we're going to spend our time on right now, but these this is the larger fabric from which all of this arises for me. And of course the ultimate question, what is creativity? Our gift. Creativity. That is what I think the intelligences are for, is to help us have a really fantastic experience of ourselves as creative beings. And I guess my argument as such is that if we can honour all those different aspects of our own intelligences, then there's a greater chance, and that kind of co-creative environment, then there's a greater chance that we can actually be responsive to an environment that's in much need of being heard, like for change, for sustainability. And the creative collective is self-explanatory, really. It's like when you have a group of people in a room and you learn something new, again, because you don't know everything yet, because you're willing to enjoy not knowing everything yet. So a space of deep listening, a state of responsiveness. And from that, I've noticed that who I am is different with different people, you know. So with that in mind, like, if you notice, your language will probably change around different people. How you feel about yourself might change around different people. Like, I've gone up to some people and felt really inept. Like, I suddenly feel really like I don't know how to represent myself, or I feel perhaps just somehow less than. And then I'll go away and then I'll come back to myself. Like, out of that field, I'll come back to myself and I'll realise, oh, maybe that was somebody who has that as a concern of her own, and that part of me that can relate to it got activated. So that's also the dynamic emergence, that we aren't really distinct. And I know people say that we know that from quantum physics, but I think if you don't want to study quantum physics, just knowing ourselves is the far quicker route to understanding about how we really can't separate ourselves, except we can if we want to have some definition and not be influenced all the time by other people's moods. So you can, but you can and you can't, I guess. You can manage it, but you can't stop it in a sense. Dynamic emergence I've already gone into. And we're not going to do an exercise right now. Now, what I've shared with you is fairly already there, to some extent. What I'm adding to the mix is this. I think these two elements, our ancestral intelligence and our understanding of nature intelligence, are two really large pieces of the puzzle that are missing from how businesses make decisions, how groups who are in charge of groups of people make decisions. So those are two elements. I don't really know how much I need to go into those right now. Did anyone want to ask anything about these? Or shall I just keep going? Okay. All I can say at this moment is that ancestral consciousness, ancestral intelligence, the intelligence is on my part, not the ancestors. So that they're not in question. For me, the question is, am I able to tune into the more shamanic realms of reality? Am I able to traverse time frames and gain wisdom from listening to those that have been before? And if time isn't a continuum, so there is no future as such that hasn't happened yet, can I go there too? Can I listen in a way that is more elaborate than simply having a linear reference for time? And nature intelligence is to me blindingly obvious. The mistake with recognising it, I think, is because if one doesn't speak the language of certain different species, then the easy assumption to make is that it's not speaking, which of course is a travesty, because if someone speaks Greek and I don't say they're not speaking, I don't say they're not intelligent. If I'm honest, I say I don't speak Greek, or if I don't speak Greek and don't even know therefore which language they're in, then I just have to acknowledge I don't know this language, but I can feel, hear and see that there's some communication going on, there's intelligence here. So nature intelligence obviously is far older than human intelligence. So for us to learn that language, I think, would be helpful. I think the indigenous peoples and people who spend time with indigenous peoples or in natural landscapes have an advantage, and if the sort of more westernized culture could find some part of themselves that can respect that which it knows not yet, that could make a huge difference to the kinds of experiences we can have as a dynamic creative collective in terms of innovating new relationships. Green economics, again, not really going to go there right now. It's just, that's more to do with assumptions about growth, like business always got to get bigger, always got to make more money. We've already ascertained that the make more money seems to be more of a legal structure that's going to be changing. But there is a relationship between these different kinds of growth, because obviously growth as a form of cancer means it's somewhat out of control. We're not really at choice. It's not a holistic environment. It's not considering how its presence is affecting others. And of course we see this all around the world a lot. And it's painful. And the growth of sharing. Now growth of sharing is a completely different ballgame. And I think it has a different direction. So instead of just being like either forward, 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 I think it does more of a torus. I think growth that can feed back into itself so that it goes laterally, so that it goes to communities. You know, obviously these parameters need to be defined and looked at and all the rest of it, but just having a different way of valuing growth so that it's not unhealthy. And this is what I care about. This is where it all leads to, which is what I call sacred intelligence. And that really should be the title of this talk. Because I feel blessed to be able to both awake and asleep feel in awe of this world, to feel in awe of the fact that I'm in it and capable of having awe. And I feel the pain of separation when I watch how people behave who seem to not be living that kind of connection, and how much rejection goes on the emotional level, how much rationality is used as a way to justify a disconnect emotionally. And for those of us who do feel, then it's excruciating to watch what feels like very, very misguided decision making, because it's not fully informed, which is why I think having a greater appreciation of the intelligences is really important for understanding our limitations, like where we're at, being able to be conscious of ourselves, so that we can behave with respect. So this is a hugely long definition, and it might reduce over time, but it's the holistic integration of all intelligences, and that means across every species, functioning at their own level, so not to be judged as higher or lower, of inspired knowing, leading to creative organic evolution and natural evolution that serves the whole. And this based on an emerging understanding of respect for our planet and for our lives. This relates to creativity as such, openness, deep listening, leading us on a path of natural organic reciprocity. So is how I'm behaving, is how I'm thinking of benefit to that around me? What can I learn from that which is around me? Why am I being blocked? Am I off track? Is my thinking separate from the whole? And this results in sustainable living, otherwise known as sacred living. So those are the main points. I seem to have missed one of the slides, which is to do with pollution. So I'll put that back in later, but just to add that, because it is very relevant and it's entirely within this context. We complain a lot about corporate pollution, quite rightly, and I would define that as making one goal more important than a holistic vision. But there's also personal pollution, and I think this is a point at which we can actually have some say in the co-evolution of our species, and of course, therefore, of everyone else that we're sharing this planet with, all our neighbours. And that comes down to the mental and emotional. So mental pollution, like it might be me generating judgment, self-judgment, other judgment. It doesn't really make a difference, quite honestly. You're still generating pollution. And emotional pollution might be me choosing not to support, not to love, not to have compassion, not to feel, and sending out a vibe that's anything but supportive, basically. And it's something as humans we're so fallible to that. It's, I think, one of the hardest things is to put ourselves at the centre. If we're going to judge anything, to put ourselves at the centre, but with compassion and big eyes, and have a look and see, well, what's going on? Where am I not meeting a need of my own? That I can feel this sort of toxic quality emanating from me and creating separation between me and another, whether it's a tree, a human, a plant, it could be anything, but it's all consciousness. So that's actually it. That is the talk about our potential for dynamic emergence, our potential to be a creative collective, and our reward, which would be an experience of the sacred in an everyday life, which means that it will never be mundane again. So that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's it.
Do you want questions?
Oh, please, yes. I just did that on camera.
I can keep this running.
Yeah, we can always edit out my squirms, nose picking and so on. Does that prompt anything? Does it relate to anything in your lives? Care to share?
The bit that touches me most is when you talk about sacred intelligence. I think that's the key. That was what I got when you talked about it on Sunday.
Yeah.
And the idea that we're part of an intelligence, that we're not separate, we're not ever wholly separate from it, that our own intelligence is always subject to it, to something. So this idea that we're actually separate from the planet, from the planetary intelligence, for me,
Right.
is a mistake in a way, but it's something that we're kind of conditioned to think. So even with the best intentions, still thinking they're separate from the planetary intelligence, and talking about it then as something objective, talking about the planet as something objective.
Yes.
You've already created a split which may not exist.
Well, and I think on top of that too is, and again this would be more of a hunch than something that I could rationally spell out yet, but our intelligence, in my felt sense, is in direct, the health of our intelligence is in direct relationship, direct proportion to the health of a really diverse planet. And if the diversity becomes removed, like with the various species, the sixth extinction, you know, as they're removed, I feel like parts of our potential for further expansion of our own consciousness, or our experience of consciousness, I see that as a relationship. And that's part of the dumbing down, you know. Potentially that's a thought, at least. It's not just that everyone's watching televisions all the time, and therefore there's a dumbing down going on. But what if nature, as we as nature, reduce the diversity? Like even looking at how we grow crops, like there used to be thousands of potatoes, now there's only like 5 varieties. And the same with apples, like there's so much getting sort of homogenized, simplified. And I don't think it necessarily means that our intelligence increases.
Do you think that reduces our intelligence because
I
of
think it might.
the diversity of it?
Yeah. I think there's something about diversity. Of course diversity creates strength, you know, in terms of structure. Everything relying on everything else, it means you've got to be awake. So to just replace that natural organic diversity with bioproducts, like bioengineered food or plants or cows, I mean, God knows what, humans next. It's just replication at that point, it's not innovation.
that was something I realised recently when I was just thinking about systems theory, and one of the keys to the basis of systems theory is innovation and creativity, and that was the penny drop for me at that point when I saw that. It's not, because I was put off by the term originally, systems theory, because I thought, probably because I'm not crazy about systems, but when I realised that at the heart of it was innovation and creativity, and that was actually what made the whole thing work, I got more interested in it.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of systems theory because it has deep ecology in it. So it might be a language thing too, because it can sound a bit mechanistic, can't it? What flags got then? Vicky, what was on your mind? Or in your body, heart?
No, just that there wasn't anything particularly to say, because I just absorbed it as a general yes.
Yeah.
I'm with you all the way.
Okay. I guess my audience as such, my intended audience, is not necessarily us, because I know I'm talking to peers here. So the intended audience is really for people who don't have years of time spent reading spiritual books or studying spirituality or studying shamanism or spending time in rainforests, who perhaps live a very 9-to-5 life, but still there's some crack open there where there's a sense that there might be a deep longing, that there is another way to approach this that might be slightly more left-brained in character, but that leads into the vastness. And language within that environment is actually a really helpful tool. Like, if we were doing our own thing, it would just be music, you know, or meditating, or something that's more body-based, more esoteric, because that's what we already know. But as we are all different, then I think from a structural perspective, it feels exciting to me to at least try and bring a new use of language into the forum of decision making.
It strikes me that this might work well in any of those settings that I think you're talking about with those people, if it was contextualised within some kind of experiential piece, like using music and sound, so that there was a bit like we're doing today in a way, so that there was a context for it.
That's a really good idea, exactly.
So they weren't just getting it with their head. Maybe you frame it either side of an experience
with some music or toning.
That's participative.
Yeah, good idea. Someone else said I should have pictures in my slide. So I don't really know if that's necessary. I guess it doesn't hurt. I think brevity is good, personally.
Yeah. Especially when you've got a lot of concepts like that.
Yes, there's quite a lot in there. It made me think of something and I've already forgotten what it was.
To do with context, he was talking about context within which to put this over.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Polly Higgins. Polly Higgins is, I think she's Scottish, and she's a lawyer. And on September 30th of this year, they're doing a trial, a real/mock trial at the Supreme Court for ecocide. And I'm so excited about it. Yeah. And it's actually a twofold law that she wants to bring into being. And the first is all things to do with human impact on the environment through business practices or through any practice really, but again, human to planet, human to non-human, let's put it that way. But then there'll be a second section also for just natural disasters of their own. And I'm not quite sure what the relationship to that would be, but more like to do with tsunamis and earthquakes and so on. But the idea is that because companies, which is why I'm quite clear on that at the moment, companies currently do have a legal obligation to make profit. They are legally bound to make profit above all else. So with the introduction of the Ecocide Bill, I don't know if we call them bills over here, law.
Yeah, a bill then becomes an act.
Okay. Then the first priority, the first legal requirement, is doing no harm. And presumably there'll be some kind of wording in there that will perhaps hopefully be even more positive than that. But at the very least, if you do harm, then you're behaving illegally. And then there would be subsidies to help companies transition how they do stuff, so that they don't all immediately go out of business because their behaviours are all completely illegal suddenly. So that, I think that's a phenomenal thing. I've actually just put a link to her sort of process. I forget what it's called right now.
Is it called the Earth Charter?
No, but it's in
similar.
keeping with that. I mean,
I
it's
saw
honouring
her
the Earth
speak
Charter.
at the Women on Fire conference, talking about giving the Earth,
Human
Earth
rights.
Is it to do with wild law? Because there's a lot been written, a lot being said now in some quite influential circles about wild law.
I haven't
It's
heard
the
of
idea
that.
that a stream, a river, a forest has rights, and
Yes.
that's coming through. Anthony's done some work on that with his
Fabulous.
sacred sites work, and the sacred site has rights also.
Of course.
Mm.
Yes.
And these things. I mean, that's probably the first place, because indigenous groups are claiming that places have rights.
Yes.
Their sacred places have
Yes.
rights, and that's the work Anthony did.
That's really
And that's
exciting.
actually had some political.
Well, I
It's got a
think
little bit of
Christopher
political weight
Law
back
has
behind
also
it.
written a book a while, like literally decades ago, about should trees have standing, is the title of the book. So Polly has really taken that to the next level by bringing it into the legislature forum, and it's going to be streamed. The whole thing's going to be streamed, so you can watch it. And it's real judges, real jury, real everything. So the only thing that's not, I think the idea is to see what is the effect. That's why it's called a mock, because they just want to see what are the responses to this. Will people relate to it? But yes, I mean, I've grown up and I know, who knows where it comes from. One of those intelligences, just having a deep understanding that everything has rights. And so to watch the violations, it stupefies me. I mean, and it hurts physically, emotionally. It hurts because there is a connection there, and it's certainly not before time. I love the fact though that that's what's emerging.
I forget the guy who's written a really important book about it. His name might be McIntyre, I'm not sure, but if you look up wild law,
Okay. Well,
it's, Thomas Berry talks about it in his book. Joe Thomas Berry.
I do. Yeah.
So I don't understand. This is being streamed, what, just online? Is it? Who
I
is
don't
this
know if
going
it'll
out
be-
to? This.
Whoever wants to watch it. So it will be. There's a website, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, of course, and I can't right now because I only literally found this today, and I've put all these links on my website actually. But there are two websites that she refers to. If you go to Positive TV, they're actually showing the interview that they did with her, and she names the two websites where you can find out more about it. But I think it's positivetv.tv, I think is the website address, or mine, claireheady.com. And if you go there on my links page, they're up there. So it's a fake trial, but with real people. So no law would get passed because of it, but it's a practice run basically.
Is it just going to be online? Is it going out on TV somewhere?
I don't know. I don't know if it's on TV.
It's like a big kind of advert, isn't
If you
it?
can get enough
For a
people
great
watching
idea.
it online,
Fantastic.
it's like being on TV these days, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. Yes, with the amount of people that nowadays choose to watch perhaps the more intelligent versions of the news, which tend to be online. So yeah, I can't wait for that.
Because Positive TV are based here now, aren't they? It's
Yes.
It's, what's her name? Dana, isn't
Dana.
it? Yeah, she's great.
Yeah,
It's
she
really
is.
good stuff.
And she might be actually hooking up with another company that does TV in New York. because they want to have her positive TV actually on television. So I know that she's been in talks with them about that.
That's very exciting.
And they approached her.
We need positive.
Yeah, yeah. And there's lots of it actually. It's really easy to find. It's just not put on the mainstream news.
Yes. That's right.
Because everyone says, oh, people love disaster, and it's like, really?
No, you don't.
That's not a reference point for me. No. So, but yeah, a lot of it's just faulty thinking or mistaken thinking. If we tweak it just a little bit, it can make a big difference. And for some of them, they might just have to come at it through the rational to start opening up their hearts, because it's not that easy, is it, to sit in your heart? Especially at the beginning, when there might be a lot of stuff in there that doesn't feel very happy, which is often the case when you haven't been in there for a while. But that changes. It's really nice for me to have a chance to put this out there, because doesn't this feel even more like whole than when I did it on Sunday? At least
Yeah,
it
it's
does
slightly
for me.
different. Yeah, yeah.
It feels more internalised.
Yeah.
Bizarre though, slides keep disappearing.
Yeah,
Let's
you
look
lost a
at that.
couple. You lost a couple on Sunday.
I
different
did.
Ones.
Of course, one part of me goes, oh well, they're obviously not meant to be there, and it's like, yeah, well, it could just be a mistake.
All right. Thanks.
Thank
Claire.
you.
Oh,
Great.
thank you.